Uh, Good morning, Mr. Tarun Ghulati, and thank you so much for joining us today for this very interesting interview on policy perspectives. Before we begin, let me just introduce you to our audience today. Uh, Mr.
Thank
Tarun
you for
Ghulati.
thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, sir. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining in. We have with us today Mr. Tarun Ghulati. He is the independent candidate for the Mayor of London. The elections are right around the corner. They're on 4th of May. He is one of those people who has very deep into business and finance. So he has been a seasoned chairman, president, CEO. He has been a board member on various companies. In fact, he has sat over the board of over 40 boards internationally in Singapore, Guernsey, Mauritius, Botswana, Kenya, and of course the UK. He's a strategic advisor and he has an enviable track record of delivering practical and creative solutions to complex issues, especially in the banking and financial services sector around the world. Now, although he has lived in more than 6 countries while he was working with Citibank and HSBC, he is presently, of course, for, from, and by London. And he has joined us today for a very interesting discussion on the importance of municipal laws, the role they play in shaping policy making, and why they are important. Because we keep talking about international laws, international affairs, we keep talking about national policies, but we tend to believe that democracy at its various levels and at its most grassroots level stays at the municipal law level. And we have Mr. Tarun Ghulati with his immense experience and expertise here today to shine a light on this issue. So thank you so much for joining once again.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Just a quick correction. The elections are on 2nd of May, not the 4th of May. So it's actually on Thursday, coming Thursday.
Okay.
Very much around the corner.
Yes. It happens to be my mother's birthday, so I'm sure it's going to be a lucky day for you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you.
So just digging right into it, Mr. Ghulati, I wanted to ask you, how does democracy play out at the municipal level? Do you think it's important? And if so, why?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think what democracies have forgotten, and I'll give you the example of London, for instance. London was actually a set of villages that have been meshed together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle where various villages came across. And what has been happening is people have forgotten to seek the views of the individuals that live in those villages. There are over 270 diasporas from different nations that call London home. Over 300 languages are spoken. So you can't have a one size fit all. When you have so many people living from different countries, you got to make sure you take their views along. You got to make sure you understand those cultural nuances. And I can give you many examples, but that is where the governments are failing today. That is why, although there's an election around the corner, when you go around speaking with people, there's a lackluster response. You'll be surprised, last mayoral elections, 63% of the population didn't come out to vote because they feel they're not going to be heard. Their ideas are not heard because their problems are not being resolved. So I think it's extremely important that democracies and governments realize that if you don't take the input of people at the municipal level, at the grassroots level, it's a recipe for disaster.
Right, and that's very interesting. 270 diasporas and 300 languages. We would have expected that, considering that London has been the financial capital of the world in that region for so long, since time immemorial, really. But we wouldn't have expected this kind of a melting pot of cultures and diasporas. Can you give us perhaps examples of situations or factors because making policies that are beneficial and at the same time beneficial for such a diverse population is a tough proposition. And, so can you give us examples of key factors that influence or things that we should be keeping in mind when we are catering
That's,
to them?
yeah, that's a great question. Basically, when you have different cultures enmeshed in a city like London, you got to make sure you understand what people want. It can't be something which you thrust upon them, but that doesn't work. I'll give you a couple of examples very quickly. I was in a meeting with about 20 Muslim leaders recently, and I was very keen to see the policemen on the beat. In other words, visible policing. Now, policemen on the beat is good, but visible policing has different connotations to different people. Sat in the room were some people who came from a country where you actually have the if you will, there were people from Afghanistan there, and they felt that the Taliban is, an overarching force that is watching over them. And there were these mujahideen sitting there. These are leaders, obviously. And when I use the word visible policing, for them, it was as if in London, you want to impose an idea where police will be watching them all the while, every move, every step. And conversely, that's in Afghanistan, the same thing you'll be surprised plays out to some Europeans. So if you look at the Romanians, they had communism earlier and after the revolution went away. But for them, again, it has the same connotations because, again, the regime in the past used to be watching them with an hawk's eye. And for them, visible policing meant that you're going to be sort of impinging on their freedoms. So when governments decide, you got to have policing in a way, if you talk of policing, which takes the cultural nuances into play, and it can't be one size fit all, as I said earlier. So it's very critical to get the input of the people. You actually should have advisors coming in from different communities because different communities may have different desires, different things that make them tick. So as I've given you those two examples, there are many more, but it's critical that you take the input of the people.
Yes, that's very interesting. And also because internationally, especially policing, has so many different connotations. Even in the other continents, sometimes people feel that they are being watched more than the others.
That's
Uh,
correct.
because of their ethnicity or the color of their skin or the area where they are living in. And of course, as you're saying, these are sensitivities that will have to be kept in mind, and these are some things that we perhaps will never think about when we are making federal laws.
That's
But as
correct. That's very correct. That's very correct because we may have a police force which then may predominantly may not be doing it willingly or sort of knowingly, but sometimes it may happen that it may appear to that population that because we are certain ethnicity or certain color, this is being treated differently, and that's where the governments and the democracies need to be taking care of these sort of things.
yes. Now, catering to the city of London through laws, policies, trying to tackle its issues has always been. I was talking to someone from the UK embassy, and I always felt that it always feels like, in Hindi we say "आसमान से टपके खजूर में अटके," jumping into a frying pan kind of a situation. It's always been like that if we look at history when it comes to London. Uh, but so just looking at things that London is facing right now, there is growing inflation rate, there is really unsustainable real estate prices, there is rising unemployment, and these are all issues that are also in a way international concerns, because if we look at the world globally right now, we are seeing these problems everywhere else in the world. But you are a person who has very deep knowledge of how finance works, and you're a problem solver yourself. Uh, what type of policies do you think help alleviate such situations, if not turn them around, but at least make them better?
Well, firstly, one of the things that is happening with politicians, when we live in a democracy, we all pay a certain amount of taxes into a common purse. And that common purse is meant to be deployed effectively, efficiently for the common good. But what politicians tend to do, they forget that they were elected by the people, and they go off on their own expeditions and explorations, give very poor arguments for the policies, and basically that makes the whole idea that the people are upset. And with that, people are looking for very basic things. They're looking for safety, they're looking for security, they're looking for good, genuine, affordable homes. They're looking for public transport that works, the roads that don't sort of hamper their movements. But genuinely, people, at least in London, the current mayor seems to have forgotten that these are not ideas that are he should espouse theories in terms of launching some of these policies. So some of these policies are disasters. And those are the policies that I'll abolish. In case you wish to know more about them, I'll certainly speak about them.
Yes, we'd love to hear about those.
Well, firstly, safety is paramount, and one life lost is one too many. The current mayor, Mr. Sadiq Khan, has shut down police stations. So you don't see police stations in many areas now. And that means the people actually don't even see the police anywhere around. I was mugged on my own high street. So I want to reopen police stations. I also want to create a concept for police booths. You see a lot of them in India. So at least you have somebody to go to, a policeman who has an ear, you can sort of talk to him, a ear to listen. And then I want to make sure you have more police because there's not adequate police. But you want to compensate them properly. You want to have the right sort of police. So if you don't pay the right sort of money, you know what you get. So I want to train them, but I want accountability there. I want to, in business, whatever gets done, whatever gets measured gets done. I want to measure them on a league table. So if X is not performing and Bob is doing better, then obviously X needs more training. But despite that training, if X continues to perform poorly, well, he should be shown the door, or she should be shown the door. You also want to make sure all genders are protected. So you want to have, particularly women are feeling very vulnerable now. So you can't actually see growth of people looking over their shoulders. So you open separate creative cells so that people, nobody wants to be a criminal. So you got to go to the root cause of crime. And you want to make sure there's proper lighting, proper surveillance, youth engagement programs. And when you do all that, education in aspects that can lead to crime, that will then alleviate to some extent the problems of policing. So when you handle policing, I'm actually an advisor to the Global Cyber Alliance, a strategic advisor. So I deal with law enforcement agencies globally and with the police. So crime is not something that is easy to understand, and there can be external factors sometimes propagating things. You got to tackle it at the grassroots level, educate people. And what I find, it was funny, you'll be surprised. The other day on TV, the current incumbent, Mr. Sadiq Khan, said, I'm going to hire 1,300 more policemen. And the conservative candidate, Ms. Susan Hall, says, I'm going to hire 1,500 more policemen. You can't have a back of envelope calculation. Whether it's 1,300 or 1,500, that one-upmanship is not necessary. You must do whatever it takes to save lives. And you'll be surprised, 21 teenagers lost their lives last year. There have been over 1,000 murders during the 8 years of Mr. Khan's regime. So that's one policy where they failed the people. London has become the most congested city in the world. It's also the slowest city in the world. Now, what that means is people are actually spending over 156 hours on an average. A driver is spending 156 hours on an average driving around in congestion. Now, that causes pollution, that causes mental health issues. And equally, they're losing about 1,375 pounds on an average, because when you're driving around, you're guzzling petrol, you're losing time. Now, Mr. Khan has introduced a policy called the ultra-low emission zone. which basically means if you're coming from one part of London, outer London, and then you're moving in, you're paying £12.50. Now, you mentioned the cost of living crises. That's money. Uh, and this is for cars that are non-compliant, if they're registered before a certain cutoff date. Now, a lot of people can't afford to buy new cars, and to pay £12.50, imagine if you're a carer and you got to move in to say, sort of help somebody that you care for. Now, that's a lot of money. If you're a freight forwarder and you got to come in again, that's again a lot of money. So you got to pass it on to customers. So most well-heeled people will have compliant cars, but there are people that don't. And then to make the problem worse, if you come in a little deeper to a central London, you pay a £15 congestion charge. So I'm going to totally abolish this disaster of a policy called ULEZ. And then there are 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. Modern cars are designed at cruising speed or much more. So your bicycle's actually whizzing by faster than the cars. So I'm going to remove these 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, make them history, unless, of course, they're close to a school or a hospital or a residential area. Then they have something called the low-traffic neighborhoods. So basically what you do is you divert traffic from one neighborhood or one area into the other. But that's not solving the problem either, because whilst you might reduce the traffic in one area, you increase the traffic in the other. So these, in conjunction with the councils, will again be removed with a way to making them history. And congestion charge over weekends and holidays will again there'll be no congestion charge. Because the freedom of movement is as important for me as the freedom of speech. So that's where you got to have London moving again. When you have it moving again, because the current mayor has brought London to a standstill. And that's what I'm about to change. And one more policy which is critical is communities are feeling insular and broken because they don't have good, you mentioned homes, they don't have good, genuine, affordable homes. And then those that are already living in social housing, not enough investment has gone to that. So they're poorly maintained and they're not looking great. So people are feeling disenchanted. And even if there's gentrification taking place. So what that means is people move into a certain area, prices go up, rents go up, and then, sorry, I've got a bit of a throat. People find it difficult then to rent there. And then because there are no rent controls, people are moving out of that area. So communities have become broken because of all this. So there's a couple of things I will do. I'll build more genuine affordable homes by giving incentives to the new developers, new developments, so that they have a target to create a certain percentage of affordable homes. You got to fast track planning processes so that that the approvals comes in faster. And then you got to create community land trusts. So different communities, if they have a trust, like you have a lot of that happening in India, you'll have certain communities tend to live together. So you create these land trusts. And then more importantly, there is a lot of brownfield land with the councils, and you bring in investments. So for instance, I was involved as an advisor to the South Hall regeneration and the Heathrow partnership. So regeneration is important. What that will do is it'll free up the brown land. You'll have more housing available because people are finding it difficult to rent now. So you need to have some rent controls. Once you bring that in, you'll find communities buzzing again. They'll be smiling again, which has been lost today. And when you bring in money from outside, there'll be investments. So I plan to create actually sustainable impact funds. So I'm not going to make excuses like Mr. Khan. The government has not given me money. It's a 21 billion sterling budget over the last 8 years of his tenure. Over 140 billion sterling has been expended. You'll be surprised. The GDP of London is perhaps the size of the 18th largest country in the world. If you combine the budget of Delhi, Mumbai, and several other cities, that's what London is all about. So it's one of the biggest jobs, perhaps, in the world. And somewhere down the line, all that has been forgotten. So those are some of the key policies, amongst others, that I want to bring more equality between the disabled. So I want to give them access to transportation. There is something known as a freedom pass and the 60+ pass. they can't use it during peak hours. So if they've got to go to a hospital or see a doctor, you're spending money. So I want to change that so that they can travel freely, bring in discounts for students so that they can again not spend as much on travel. Overall, when you do some of these things, economies tend to prosper.
That's a lot to do, but your job, it seems like it's already cut and ready, and you've done a lot of research on what needs to be done. You make us feel, and rightly so, London being one of the financial capitals of the world needs to be run like a well-oiled business,
Of
and
course.
you're the man for the job
Thank
after
you.
being a CEO for so long. Uh, you were talking about sustainability funds, and interestingly, we have a question from the audience. And Mr. Vishal Tripathi, he would like to ask how London municipalities are dealing with climate change adaptation, and what are the challenges? Do we need additional planning? And he's also concerned that London may be one of the cities which may be impacted by rising sea levels. So, your take on that.
Well, that's correct. Of course, a former vice president in the US, Mr. Al Gore, said that the ice cap will shrink, and we're still there. But yes, climate change is happening. I intend to make London the greenest city in the world, the most digitally connected, so I can espouse more of technology and innovation. But that's a great question. I think, like any other city, London needs to have more recycling, more regeneration programs. Sustainability is key, but there are challenges. For instance, when you tell, I was sitting in I only use public transport now, by the way, for the last 10 years, because I live very centrally. I was sitting in an Uber driver's car, and he was actually the owner of a fleet of cars. He had about 100 odd cars. And his concern was that there are not enough charging points because the government is now moving them towards electric cars. So if there are not enough charging points, that's a problem, because you have a car and you got to wait for a long time. But don't forget, these charging points are run on normal electricity. Now that again is not helping the atmosphere. So there's a myth about electric cars that you set a deadline, and what tends to happen with most national governments, yes, you want to bring about control your carbon footprint and everything else, but they don't think that the Uber driver with the fleet of cars is suffering now because he's got those cars, but then charging points are not sufficient. So the planning has to be clear, crystal clear. You got to think ahead. And those are some of the challenges where the jury may be out whether electric cars are really the solution, because those batteries and other things also to make them take on and increase the carbon footprint and sort of pollute the air. But having said that, yes, there has to be a target. We each need to be conscious. So as I'm using public transport, but that can only happen if your public transport system actually works. Investment needs to go into it, and not enough investment has gone into that. So if you have you come to London, there you'll hear a common refrain when you go to your tube station. It says, "Mind the gap." Mind the gap. So mind the gap. I was speaking to a lady the other day, and she actually fell through the gap at a station in Victoria Station. And was she not carrying her big bag, she would have gone down and probably lost her life. So investment needs to go into it. There's also noise pollution. It's not so when you go underground, this is one of the oldest underground systems in the world, and not enough investment has gone into some of these things. So you got to also control noise pollution, because too much of pollution and noise also causes mental health issues. So all these factors are impacting. You need to have more waste reduction, more robust waste reduction programs. You got to look at SDG with a keen eye, but at the same time be realistic about your targets, because if you set targets that are not realistic, then the public suffers. And the ultimate aim should be to make sure everything we do is for the benefit of the people who we are serving.
Yes, I think sustainability is a chicken and eggs kind of a situation. You try to resolve one thing, the other thing gets impacted, especially in a city geographically located like London. for example, which doesn't get a lot of sunlight, so really can't have charging stations running on solar power. So, and that makes it quite interesting. Now, now you're talking about some very key issues that are really very important to run an economy, especially something like a financial center, the transport, housing. You need housing if you want to attract talent to work in your city, and you need help for the rising elderly population. Internationally, in the next 15 or 20 years, we're going to see that a major chunk of the world population actually requires care and, home assistance. And how we're going to do that is going to become a problem if it takes 27 pounds to reach London every day. That's really interesting what you say. Now, also, we keep talking about how internationally for us, London is like a financial capital, but then also the UK, its entire economy is also so much based on small businesses and small business owners, for example, who were the most impacted, for example, by COVID-19. Now, they are also a major chunk of the people of London. So, what is the role of small businesses at the municipal level, and how can we help them? Do you think that municipal policies can help small businesses?
Well, small businesses are the engine for growth for any country, any economy. I would say about 75 to 80% of the GDP is generated by small businesses. Uh, and anybody who thinks that this should not be nurtured, fostered, cared for, the right sort of policies is fraught for disaster. So I think I do a lot of work with small businesses. Firstly, I'm on the board of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the Asian business for the last 15 years. The oldest, sort of longest serving committee member. I was a former deputy chair. I'm also chairman and co-founder for one of the largest startup foundations in the world, where we had actually 11,000 startups come into India last year, and from 11 countries. I also am chairman for one of the most respected brands. All these are not for profit, by the way, where it's called the 21st Century Icon Awards, where we have the Lord Mayor, former Lord Mayor, and 3 members from the House of Lords, the president of the Commonwealth Games, and so on and so forth, on the panel of judges, where finalists and winners have come from 44 countries to date. Now, the London Stock Exchange Group has been a partner with that and several other entities. Now, when you're dealing with individuals and businesses, they come from different sectors, and you alluded to small businesses. You got to make sure there's enough finance available. Sometimes they may not have tangible security, but they have a great business plan. Or sometimes they have the money, but they need mentorship. They need So if you have an idea that is actually solving a problem, that helps if it's a new business. Banks may be more sort of keen to lend, but banks are the good old days when you saw your friendly banker, you could walk into a branch, are now changing. You see the guy across the phone. There are systems and algorithms that are deciding finance. That makes it a lot difficult. So in my humble opinion, there's a dire need to actually have an SME bank, a pure SME-driven bank, where you cater to the needs of the SMEs, because they need hand-holding. They need technology. Sometimes they don't have all the infrastructure for IT and growth. Artificial intelligence is coming in. How do they overcome those sort of challenges? There are supply chain issues. So if you facilitate all that for an SME, so I'm actually talking to the Federation of Small Businesses. They're seeking my advice on matters like that. For me, this is critical. So I plan to bring down council taxes and bring down the business rates, because what is happening is business rates is a small shopkeeper, a small business that is paying an onerous amount of business rate means that the prices go up and the business becomes unsustainable. And so how do you bring that big down? Because the mayor takes a certain percent from councils, and that needs to come down. I mentioned earlier I'm going to create funds because I was CEO for UTI International globally, so I understand fund management, asset management, and I'll bring in money from outside. There'll be no more excuses when I'm the next mayor. You work for the people, and there'll be experts. There are people who know things better than I do. I don't have all the answers. You bring in city planning experts, transportation experts, security experts, and indeed, when you bring in housing experts, so you bring in all the experts, advisors from different communities, you will see London. I view London actually as a global bank where different cultures and different communities come here to actually, it was considered a land of opportunity where businesses, individuals thrive. And so I want to build a balance sheet for London such where profitability for me is the well-being of everybody. And that's the sort of London I'm seeking. So, when you and I are sitting on an aircraft, which is still taxiing around the runway, a lot of factors come into play before the aircraft takes off, which we are not aware of. So when that aircraft, which I call London, takes off, I want to take everybody along with it, those 270 communities and diaspora from different nations that live here. And I want to bring back the smiles on the faces of everyone.
That sounds really aspirational, and I hope we see that in the future. And I see your passion for London and the amount of love and the amount of concern you have for the city. You've traveled and worked all over the world as an investment banker, but you finally decided to settle in London. And now you've been living there for, I guess, more than 2 decades. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Uh,
That's correct.
why London? What made you choose London from all these cities you were in?
That's a fabulous question, I think, because there's sort of a living bridge between India and London. So I'd lived in so many countries, traveled all over the world, worked in all continents, and this seemed like home. I was carrying 6 booklets of the Indian passport, and I felt this was a great place where my children were studying and they were going to university. So I was working with HSBC those days, and they were shooting me off to Armenia as CEO. So I said, look, let me remain here. In those days, London was thriving. So if you look at it, there were over 24 Fortune 500 companies headquarters here, right? Today, there are only 4 or 5. Why has that happened? Because you mentioned costs have gone up, security, safety, transportation has all been impacted. So those entities have left, which means jobs have gone from here. The revenue generation entity, and indeed the pride of having all these companies here. So I chose London because it's a great financial center. As a financial services person who's run large global businesses all over the world, including as chairman of a bank, I felt this was the place to be, where I can make an impact and make a difference. But today, as I said, the current Mayor, Mr. Sadiq Khan, has actually let Londoners down. The politicians have blurred the vision for London. Politicians like him, he comes from the Labour Party. And actually, London is 8 years behind now. And he's seeking a 3rd term. He almost sounds like a trainee to me, trying to seek an extension. It needs a safe pair of hands. And the other hand, you have a conservative candidate who's worse than a trainee because she was a GLA member and saw all these policies go through. So if she should have raised a louder voice, and if her voice was not loud enough, she should have used a megaphone or a mic, but nobody heard of all these issues. So I feel London is a great place. I think it's one of the best cities in the world. It's on the index of top cities in the world. I want to make it the greatest city. And that can only be done with the passion. My family has been involved in public service from the 19th, 20th, and 21st century. So public service, we co-founded Punjab National Bank. We gave Lahore electricity, first agriculture minister for undivided Punjab, and several other factories. And so, in some way, or played a role in shaping what India is today. So for me, public service is key. I've been doing that all over the years. It takes a certain time, a bold individual to keep doing that. So whilst people are leaving London now, I'm here because I love London. India is my Janam Bhumi. This is a Karam Bhumi.
Now, it's quite interesting, and I'm just going to, elaborate a little on this because you asked me if I've been to London. I have, and frankly speaking, for a person from coastal India, London can be a bit depressing because it rains, there's no sunshine. But what I found the most interesting was that when you enter the London airport, one of the first things that you see even before you get to a passport stand is a poster, which is of a woman who says she loves to dive into ice cold water for a swim, right? And it's called a sport of a kind, I guess, something in there. So there must be something in the people of London, something in the air that helps you become more resilient, helps you become a bit more. So what is in the air of London? What's in the people of London that makes them that we can channelize to make it a better city?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's no other city like London, believe me, anywhere in the world. This is the most cosmopolitan city. As I said, over 300 languages spoken. It's a very welcoming city. So, you have 9.6 million odd people living here and largely living in harmony. You actually have different languages spoken here. Obviously, as I said, different cultures thrive, different cuisines. And so it's also what about the museums and the theater? You'll be surprised the creative industry contributes to about 1/5 of the economy. Yeah. So I'm going to make sure that you're talking about theaters and people involved in that. I'm going to make sure I do all I can for that industry. You have large and small venues, you have musicians, you have artists. So there is a lot going in London, which doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Yes, it's an island, but it's an island like paradise for many. But things have changed. Things have changed. The cost of living crises. You first had the financial crises in 2009, 2010, and then you had Brexit, which many people didn't want. And so our best trading partners are sitting next door in Europe, but they're not necessarily being wooed like I will. The current mayor has done nothing to sort of get in a good relationship there. And then you had COVID, unfortunately, where people became insular. So you use the word lonely, yes. For many, London can be a lonely place. But for me, it's a land where I think much can be done to make sure it remains a thriving city where all cultures actually continue to do what they want to do. I want to bring in that municipal, local government sort of an idea where you get advisors from local governments, which is what you were talking about initially. And one would say love is in the air, but London has a sort of air that sort of is for everybody. And that's unique. So that's where you find everybody flocks here during summer, and people from all over the world come here. But things have changed, so I'm going to make sure I bring back the mojo for London and for Londoners.
Yes, I mean that sounds really cool that you want to bring back the mojo. And as you said, when we talk about London, we look at parallels like New York and of late, Singapore, for example, which has emerged so well and completely on the basis of governance, because Singapore also doesn't have its own water, doesn't have its own food supplies, it's struggling with housing. So, in a way, for a novice, we probably would compare London with New York and Singapore. But what, according to you, are these distinctive challenges which London particularly has, which you think are not encountered elsewhere in the UK, or makes governing London different from governing these other cities?
That's again a fantastic question. London, as I said, contributes to over 22% of the national economy here. So if London gets a sneeze, I think UK will get a cold, and if not, fever. So I mentioned security challenges, where again, it's not a safe place today. The current mayor has done nothing to alleviate the risks people are facing on a daily life. The other challenge, as I said, is congestion, movement. If you're not, so for instance, if you are making sure that it's a war on motorists in a way. So motorists are not able to move around, then your public transportation system has to be very robust. That needs improvement, that needs investment. There are tube strikes, for instance, very common. And the drivers haven't been paid or an increase over the last 5 years. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm going to review compensation, because you can't ignore these things. I've tackled unions all over the world, particularly in India when I was there, and there were strong unions then. So that's another challenge which the current mayor should have grappled with. And affordable housing, as I said, is making people insular. Communities have become divided. And off late, I think the war in Gaza, where the governments have ignored public sentiment, where I believe there's a genocide taking place, there's carnage taking place, innocents are losing their life. I think the government is being complicit in sending arms to Israel as we speak. In temporary or total ceasefire stoppages as well. So this again is causing people a lot of angst. People are coming out every weekend demonstrating for a stoppage as well, because humanity is, people are not being human here. So I'm not for one community or the other. I sit in London. It's beyond my pay grade to be putting a stop or asking. But I'm a bold, strong person. Where something goes wrong, somebody needs to stand up. The whole idea is, again, the national government needs to listen, because this could actually spiral totally out of control. And sometimes politicians don't understand that there are limitations. This is not about sitting on a chair. This is about dealing with people. People have hearts that tick and minds that can understand what is wrong. And that's what's missing here. So I've been the strongest voice for stoppages. That's impacting London also. So my idea is, I want every community, I repeat, every community to live in harmony. So when I was growing up in India, and my mother, who I unfortunately lost about 2 weeks ago, and she's no more. But when she would pack me a little tiffin, and I would go out there, and I liked somebody else's tiffin or lunch box. We shared, and so it didn't matter where somebody came from or what they were doing. Those days need to come back, where people live in harmony. And that's the sort of London. I know I can do it. I'm the sort of person who hasn't changed for decades. I feel for people. I feel for things that are happening. And I'm bold. Geopolitically, the world is at an inflection point. And that way we need to have bold, decisive leadership, somebody with experience, gravitas, who sat on big tables, who's handled bigger budgets than the current year's 21 billion sterling budget. And so none of the other candidates, including the independents, have that experience collectively. So I'm hoping that we can win this election with the support, blessings of, I'm getting a lot of love from India, a lot of support, and indeed all the other communities. So with that, I hope to change London, bring back the old glory, and make it the greatest city in the world.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tarun. As you know, British Policy Think Tank, it was founded with a vision that we want to make more informed policy making. We want to have more evidence-based policy making. And in a way, we want the voices to be heard, which sometimes go unheard in the din of, bureaucratic requirements. And it was a pleasure hearing you today. because it, in a way, aligns with what I believe policy making is. I believe that if you run a country or a city like a well-run business with processes, with institutionalization, taking care of all the stakeholders, it really helps bring about a change and helps the people have a better life. And so it was a pleasure hearing from you today. I'll just wait if there are any questions from the audience. But while we get that, how would you like to conclude this? What are your last thoughts on this topic?
Well, this is time to make history. 2nd of May, next Thursday, is the election for the Mayor of London. I'm an independent candidate. I'm independent because politicians have blurred the vision for London and they have let London and Londoners down. I'm the most experienced of any of the other candidates. I have handled these issues all over the world, larger budgets. So I want people to come out and vote for me overwhelmingly. I request them and I beg them to do the right thing, put their hands on their heart. This is not a national election where you got to choose between one party or the other. So I'm frequently asked this question, can an independent become the next London mayor? Of course I can. Of course I will, with your help. So that's my plea to all Londoners. Come out and vote for me, as I'm the most experienced. I promise you, you will have your smiles back. All those problems become history because we'll bring in the experts. I don't pretend to be the expert at everything, but certainly I'm there for the people over the decades. And as I said, my family's been doing good. So I stand for integrity and trust because these politicians are not trustworthy anymore. They're not honest. They lie. They espouse figures that are incorrect. It's what I call patchwork government. And you do one thing good somewhere, something else goes wrong somewhere else. You need somebody who feels for you. It should be only that way, something that involves the people. And that's what I'm hoping for. So thank you for that opportunity.
It was our pleasure. We have one question for you. This is someone living in London, and they would like to ask you about the spike in knife violence in the city and what your plans are for countering the same. And they know a lot of legal immigrants who want to migrate to other cities up north to avoid being targeted. So do you think there is a racial element to this?
That's a good question because last year, 21 teenagers lost their lives. 18 of them were to knife crime. In fact, very close to where I live on New Year's Eve, a 16-year-old was stabbed to death. And obviously, he was unfortunately somebody's brother or son who never came back home. So knife crime has to be tackled with a fervor never seen before. And that's what I intend to do. You need to have, as I said, you need to have police, visible policing, where you see more policemen on the beat that acts like a deterrent. You need to have checkpoints where feasible. There should be no element of racial discrimination at all. At the end of the day, an element of education of the youth. So I actually go out and meet youths in different places. Youth engagement is important because that's where they get distracted sometimes. And if, they're part of some gangs, they're exploited. I want to stop that exploitation. That you got to go to the root of the problem. One of the things is poor lighting. People give very little credibility to that. I used to work for Philips in India, so I've lit up entire townships and cities. Lighting is critical. Surveillance is important. And education is important there. And when you have these police booths, some visibility, a deterrent. And indeed, you can even have checkpoints. So if you're going to a mall, I remember many years ago going into the Philippines. It's no longer the case, I know, but about 20 years going to Manila at a bar, they said, please leave your firearm outside. I'd never seen that before. But what I'm trying to say is there should be no room for people carrying knives. So you've got to make sure people are trained to handle these situations. The policemen, but at the same time, the youth needs to feel you don't have to feel unsafe. A lot of people are feeling unsafe. So create a safe environment where people actually don't feel the need, and you tackle gangs with a fervor like I said, never seen before. So I'm going to bring peace into the city, in the minds of people, but actually with those that are walking on the street. As I said, I was mugged, my phone got taken away, and the fact that there was a racial discrimination. Well, that's a tough one to answer, but that perhaps an element exists worldwide, or individuals are guilty of a lot of people are guilty of that sort of a thought process. It is true. I was the other day talking to three Uber delivery boys who happened to be Indians on a bicycle. And it was late in the night, and I was talking to them. They said they get stopped more than some other people because there's suspicion they're carrying some material that they shouldn't. There might be an element of that, and we've seen what happened in the US and some other places. I will stop that. That's why if you heard me initially, I said I'm going to look at compensation for policemen. What that means is I'm going to measure them. There'll be no room for somebody who doesn't perform. I'll show them the door. I'm a very tough one where it comes to, but you got to pay them well, train them well, get the right sort of people, make sure they understand cultural nuances, they deal with communities sensitively, and that will change the dimensions. So the listener who asked that great question, I will alleviate any such problem.
Well, I think what you especially say about policing and the way the police force needs to be trained or handled or taught to do their job has real international appeal when it comes to policy making, because these are things that I think we, struggle with worldwide. I think we've run out of time. Mr. Tarun Ghulati, thank you so much for your time today, and giving us insight into your very, very brilliant mind and the way you think about problems and how to solve them. The team of Bridge Policy Think Tank would like to wish you all the best for the
Thank you.
upcoming.
I need all the good luck, and I thank all the listeners and British Policy Think Tank, the bridge that it's creating between the world and policy making is incredible. I wish you all the luck and keep doing the great work. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. And do pray and give me your blessing and tell everybody to come out and vote for me on the 2nd of May. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.